welcome to episode 2 of Ethical Practices in the Arts. We do hope that the first episode, Ethics, is quite exciting for you. The title of this second episode is Ethical Questioning. And what I'm going to do in this video is to just give highlight of some of the key ideas presented in the readings. And hopefully this can spur us into our engagement and conversation in our live session. My name is Taiwo, facilitating this entire learning stream with Gemma. So ethical questioning, an interesting tool that we're bringing to the fore as we think about the various paradigms and frameworks around ethics. I also want to highlight that because of the nature of the subject around ethics, positioning our conversation not only within the academia, we know that we're recommending readings. It's just a way to get us started to really engage deeply in practical ways around how we think through and work with some of these ideas. In our earlier episode, we had guests who, and a lot of the conversation around even the use of the term ethics, perhaps words around agency, around participation, deconstructing power dynamics, and other kind of terms that many practitioners, many artists would rather use rather than ethics. Regardless, at the end of the day, we're agreeing to the fact that when we say ethics, we're looking into what are the ways in which we're engaging with our community in our practice in a respectful, in an accountable way. We're also interested in how do we bring ourselves to engage and then in relationship with our community. The question around positionality becomes also important in all of these various ideas. So, and I'm saying this at the beginning of this episode so that we don't get stuck on the term ethics, but that we can move beyond that and understand the premise upon which we're trying to engage together. This particular workshop explores ethical questioning, a tool that we've put together through the lens of positionality, power, and privilege. We're hoping that participants will be invited to reflect on their artistic practice and community engagement processes, tell their own truth, their own story, their own shifting identities as practitioners and artists, and the socio-political, economic, and cultural realities and challenges that rise up when implementing their art practices. In our reading, from writing ethics to doing ethics, a reflection which is written by myself, it offers us some ideas around what we think the questions that we need to start thinking about when we, even before, during, and after a particular project. As a matter of fact, I do define ethical questioning in this way. I define ethical questioning as the process of asking practice-oriented and critical questions that have ethical implications in order to better understand or challenge the system one is working in. It's important as artists to ask ourselves, how does the positionality of us as artists impact the work that we're doing in community? How does our work, our practice ensure that participants and communities' best interests are at the heart of the work? In what ways can historical realities shape the designing, execution, and implementation of arts practices? Is it even, we're also interested in asking the question, how can local and contextualized work contribute to understanding and reimagining ethics within our own sphere of community of practice? These are questions and many more that are at the heart of ethical questioning. Ethical questioning, therefore, is based on the following. That one, the idea of positionality, of practitioners having taken the deliberate step to ask themselves questions from every level, from the socio-political to the cultural to the economic to the spiritual, to every single level when it comes to in their ways in their community, in their engagement. And those questions are critical to creating an ethical practice, an ethical work, an ethical collaboration and partnership with other artists and other organizations. At the heart of ethical questioning is the idea that we have to ask ourselves questions, not just only questions, also important that we think about the quality of the questions that we're asking ourselves. So ethical questioning is built upon the idea of reflexivity, social justice, and praxis. It's developed in a way that we are taking all of these ideas to center them in our practice. Ethical questioning stands on three main ideas around reflection. Reflection before action, reflection during action, that's what we call reflection in action, and reflection on action. That's reflection after the action is done. In education and critical practice, we always talk about reflection in action and reflection on action. And the need to reflect before the action, the need to ask some questions that can prepare us before that project start, before that collaboration start, can be useful in developing, designing the project that we're working on. And then that can serve as an opportunity to help strengthen reflection on action, reflection in action, and reflection on action. So ethical questioning, therefore, is of the opinion or assume that if we are able to think and ask ourselves some questions that are specific to the project they are working on before we even start, during the action, once we've started the project, and even after, takes us closer to hopefully building and creating an ethical practice. Now, it is important to know that ethical questioning is not saying that we ask ourselves all the right questions and then everything is fine. No, but that the process of questioning before, during, and after is an opportunity to build a very strong base upon which we can lay the foundation for the kind of project that we want to do. Therefore, when we think about positionality, for example, what does that mean? What are the questions do we need to ask ourselves before we even start the project? If I'm thinking about a project in community, as a practitioner, as an artist, and as a researcher, what are the questions I need to ask myself? What's the socio-political implication or connection of this community, of this work that I'm doing to myself? What's the history? What's my own personal experience, personal journey to the experience of that community? There are a lot of questions to ask. What's in terms of social class, in terms of various policies that have implication on my own position to the community and to the project? What's my investment, really? I'm in the academia. What also important that I have to put to the table is that I have to ask myself, rather, when I'm doing project, is how does this project benefit me as a researcher? In what ways would that project benefit the community? And all of these questions are so broad, a lot of questions, but from the lens of positionality, if we ask ourselves some of those questions, it can help us to think about before, during, and after that project. The next lens to look at it is from the place of power. What power do we hold? What power is perceived also? What power is given to us? What authority do we hold? These are other questions that we need to ask. And in relationship to that is also the privilege we hold. The one we hold, the one we do not hold, the one that is handed onto us, the one we earn, and the one that is sort of, given to us. It's important to ask ourselves some of these questions. Why? Because we want to create project. We want to be ethical in our work as artists in community. And like we said in the first episode, our communities are different. The kind of art forms that we do are different. Some artists are, they're interdisciplinary. Some are just focusing on a particular discipline. Some work within institutions. Some work outside institutions. Some are freelance. So it's broad here, based on our experiences, based on the communities that we're working with, based on the nature of the work, based on the funding that is supporting the work and the kind of organization supporting it, would inform the kind of questions we're going to be asking ourselves. I do hope that some of these ideas will be exploring them further in our live session. And I encourage every participant to come to the live session with some of the questions that you are really thinking about, that you love to explore, whether before, during, and after that project. And it might be something that you've done before, project you've done before. Pick a case study that would help you to look through into this and ask yourself, what are some of those questions that you think are important? In addition to that, I'd like to also say that based on the reading that we had, there are some key questions that in the reading that are identified. I encourage us to engage with some of those questions. They are of relevance to you. And those questions are not exhaustive. They're just a way to spark the conversation, the dialogue, and help us to start bringing all of these things to the community. I give an example of an experience that I had and how ethical questioning helped, the framing of that helped me to walk through this project. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to work with some youth immigrant, international students, newcomer youth in Canada. And what was interesting was that the first year that we did the project, it was sort of like on a pro bono because there was no funding. We all came together. We did it in a way that it was really coming out of our desire, our love for this topic. But when I was about to start our project, it was important for me to call everyone involved and say, even though at this point we're doing this project in a pro bono, there is no funding and all that, we'll try our best as much as possible to be able to get access to funding as we go along. And everybody came, we did the project, it was fantastic. And then later on, we had a showing all over the place. It went well. It was successful, in my opinion. We had great review. We had a lot of personal commentary from participants and of course from audience members who wrote to us saying, this was eye-opening for me. Some of the questions that you ask around identity, around the experience of an immigrant, around the experience of refugees, of international students, particularly who are not from here, who are coming from other spaces and other cultures, it was eye-opening. And so when I say what's successful, that's what I meant. And a few months later, an organization that were organizing a conference reached out to me and say, can we show that piece? I was really excited about it. It was really great for me. But at that point, I was no longer in the role of the director of the piece. I had to put on another hat. And I was asking myself, now that this community of enthusiastic youth and have put this together, is there a way that we can compensate them and recognize rather what the work that they've done? And I went to this organization that wanted us to remount. And I said, can you please, and I was asking for X number of dollars to be able to say, thank you for being part of this. And the organization said, no, they cannot. And at that point, I called this group and I said, well, these are the questions that I'm asking myself. I want compensation, remuneration, and all of that is critical to me at this point. And these are the various questions I'm asking myself. What do you think? And then we had this conversation and then we decided, you know what, we're not going to remount. And we ended up not remounting. Now, I have other examples where similar experience happened, but what happened in other examples, whether it's, organizations or, or groups that ask for a remount, really loved the project and they were able to fundraise to be able to give, to be able to say thank you to these amazing artists that I was working with. Two different kind of examples with two different outcomes. But the question at the center of all of that is my own position. But beyond that, looking at the community that I was working with. And so asking them the questions around what's important to you right now? Do you still want to stage this, knowing fully well that, yes, we did this work pro bono and we've done it and it's great? Do you still want to go ahead with it? Also understanding that these communities, these organizations that have invited us to remount, looking at, the economic realities that they were in. And the fact that they said, no, we're not, we don't have this capacity. And we had to say, no, I learned the power of saying no. And so by asking ourselves the questions that was particular to our own situation, we were able to scale through some of those things. The point is, ethical questioning, and we're going to be exploring that further as we look at the framework of ethics of care, of justice, of profession, of service, of and engagement. We're going to be engaging ethical questioning as a tool to explore these various levels of framework. So when you come in, I encourage you to not just only come with case study alone, but come with questions based on the situation. The beautiful thing about ethical question is that at times, some of the questions you have to ask yourself, they are situational. And so without necessarily prescribing any question, there's some of the questions in the reading that are generic. I'd like you to tailor that to your own need and come with questions, come with ideas that we can explore together. And I also do hope that you'll be able to take time to listen to the podcast where our guests looking into ethical questioning, what their thought is about this idea and how this can help us to really challenge ourselves, practice as artists. Thank you so much for watching this very short video. I encourage you, if you need to take, just remind yourselves of the first episode, please take a look at the video, the short video and the podcast and the workbook. And also there's workbook for this session too. So in connection to the workbook, I hope that you can engage in the with these materials. And I really look forward to seeing you on January 28th, 2023, our second episode. And of course, looking forward to see you in the remaining episode. Thank you so much.